Welcome to CNBC Africa. We're live from Abuja, the capital of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, on the third leg of our series of conversations around ways in which the African continent should boost intra-African trade. The numbers are out. What I wanted to do today was to remind you of the journey that we force our resources to travel every single time we export them to the rest of the world. And I'll begin right home here in Nigeria. Think of the oil from Nigeria. Where does it go? We make it travel all the way to the United States of America, and then eventually it then works its way back here into Nigeria. Why do we do that? Think of the leather that we produce in Ethiopia, in Zambia, in South Africa, in Botswana. Some of the statistics I have seen say that we import shoes from New Zealand. Where does it come from? That leather coming back here from Africa. What about the gold? What about the platinum? What about the copper? How do we boost intra-African trade? I have been told by an official inside the bank that if we just began with a word that some politicians do not like to hear, some economists do not like to hear, import substitution. Let's begin in Nigeria. And we refined the crude oil that Nigeria exports to the world. We would boost intra-African trade from a lowly $27 billion to about $52 billion. At the stroke of a pen, we have increased the level of intra-African trade. So how do we do that? Well, the African Export-Import Bank has come up with the intra-African trade fair. And as I said, this is the third leg. And to help me to try to understand the issues that we need to tackle, the work that we need to do, to put in order for us to be able to boost that intra-African trade from 15% to over 20% by 2022. Let me introduce my guests. On my extreme left, I have the president of the bank, Afreximbank, Mr. Benedict Oramah. Say welcome. Thank you. Next to him, I have Ambassador Albert Muchanga. He's the Commissioner for Trade and Industry from the African Union. Sir, thank you for your time. We're also joined on the panel today by Abba Bello, CEO of Neximbank. Sir, thank you for the time again. And next to him is Mr. Victor Osadolo. He is the Deputy Managing Director of UBA. Victor, thank you. And last but not least, next to me, as you can see, is Jani Ibrahim, Engineer Jani Ibrahim. He is the Vice President of the Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce and Industry, Mines and Agriculture. Say welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome.
Let's begin the conversation. Mr. Oramah, if I can start with you, because I think we need to set out what we're trying to do with the intra-African trade fair. I have laid out the numbers. Others have laid out the numbers. Give us the broad, overarching objectives of IATF.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you to the Nigerian government and Nigerian Sport Promotion Council for organizing this sensitization session that affords us the opportunity to present to the Nigerian business community the opportunity the intra-African trade fair offers in the context of the drive Nigeria is engaged in expanding its trade, in diversifying that trade from commodities, essentially oil, to other products, and also for diversifying the markets in order to bring more resilience to the economy. The intra-African trade fair is one instrument we at Afreximbank have put in place under our intra-African trade strategy to deal with the challenge of trade information constraint. Ms. Kadaya Wani, the Managing Director of Intra-African Trade Initiative at the bank, explained that in her speech. But the biggest problem we think that confronts the intra-African trade is trade information. There are a number of ways to tackle them. But the trade fair presents a unique opportunity to deal with it in a number of ways. To create opportunity for information to flow, for countries to exhibit their goods, also to market themselves as intra-African investment opportunities. It also offers an opportunity for training and education, and also all the things that we think drive intra-African trade, especially trade in services, which is not easily disseminated through other means of providing trade information. And as Ambassador Muchanga will tell you, under the Continental Free Trade Area initiative, holding these intra-African trade fairs is important. It's important in beginning to reconnect the markets that have been balkanized. If you recall that the strategy of colonialism was to stifle the flow of information across borders so that the trade can only occur between the colonies and the metropolitan powers. We can only begin to break that by making our people to meet, to know themselves. They say that risk is perception. If I don't know you, if I haven't seen you before, I think you are too risky. Unfortunately, we're only able to see all the time our traditional trading partners. I know a situation where NEPA at that time wanted to import some transformers and wanted to import them from South Africa. And the South African entities at that time were very, very scared of taking the Central Bank of Nigeria risk. They never did anything in Nigeria at that time. It was years ago. We took on the deal, telling them, you are giving us free money because this risk you didn't have to worry about it. The Central Bank of Nigeria will pay you. But they didn't understand it, so they were scared. So these are the kind of things we see all across Africa, and this trade fair will help us deal with it. We expect more than 1,000 exhibitors. Yeah. Already more than 200 have registered. Sure. We're expecting 70,000 visitors. We expect that we also have B2B engagements so that we can close transactions there. Right. We are actually targeting to close about $25 billion in intra-African trade transactions at that trade fair. Okay. To also make it possible for SMEs, some of whom may not be able to attend, to participate. We are investing in creating a trade portal that will be available as a virtual trade fair, so that those SMEs can also exhibit online and actually conclude trades online. And we have already organized ourselves to ensure that no deal that is concluded there lacks the financing to execute it. Sure. So that is what we are planning, and these fairs will be held once every 2 years.
Yeah. Mr. Oramah, colonialism was an economic and political enterprise. Have you been able to get the political support that you need to be able to ensure not just 54 or 53 or 33, but 55 African countries will be heading to Cairo?
Well, you're right. Colonialism ended some 50 years ago or more. But a different form of it, the neo-colonialism, continued. So what is happening is that gradually that is also being broken. It will not disappear overnight, because what Africa went through was inflicted through some strategy. So Africans also have to get out of it through a strategic move. Cannot happen by chance. And when you're making the strategic move in a competitive world where Africa is going to be the continent with the largest pool of resources, the largest pool of arable land, the largest pool of water. If you have to get countries to get out of this, you have to also know that those you are going to get out, push out of the continent, or so to say, are going to fight back. So it's going to be a gradual process. It will not happen overnight. The best thing to do is to go with the coalition of the willing. And you know that the demonstration effect, if the others see the results, they will begin to follow. Sure. I do not expect that we will score 55%. Yeah. But I can tell you that we will score something close to it. We have been round, we've spoken to many governments. There is increasingly, we are beginning to see change in mindset. Yeah. People are beginning to see that markets exist around them, and they're beginning to see that the world is a very, very competitive place, yeah, and that you have to be together to be able to operate in that market.
Yeah, we positioned Ambassador Muchanga next to you there, hoping that you will be able to get some energy from him, and also that I was not trying to make you fight at all, no. But Ambassador, let me come to you. From an AU perspective, I think this is refreshing, because traditionally when we speak about the AU, we're talking about the heads of state and summit, we're talking about the regional bodies that are meeting and talking politics. Rarely do we combine the word economy and the AU, and yet here you are. What brought you in?
Thank you very much. I'll answer the question, but before I answer the question, I would like to say that our able director of ceremony made one critical statement, and that statement was that he hopes that as the trade fair grows, Africa will one day be giving aid to the rest of the world. The reality of the matter is that Africa is already giving aid, except that it carries a different name. And the name it carries is illicit financial flows. When the Mbeki report started in 2011, the amount of illicit financial flows out of Africa was $50 billion. Today, we are getting a figure of somewhere between 80 to $100 billion annual, which is a huge figure, and this is more than, fundamentally more than Africa gets in the official development aid. So on a net basis, Africa is giving aid to the rest of the world. Now, why am I here? We are here because when we waged the struggle for political independence, the leaders of the time made two critical statements. One of the statements was that as long as one African country remained under colonial rule, Africa was not totally free. That was the first statement. The second statement was that political independence without economic independence is meaningless. So Africa has been struggling for a program of economic independence. We created regional economic communities, and we built them as building blocks to the African economic community. And in 1991, in this city, the leaders of the time came up with the Abuja Treaty establishing the African Economic Community to be achieved over a period of 34 years. Then in 2012, we came up with a program of boosting intra-African trade, which the managing director talked about. And one of the key elements of that program of action was to accelerate the establishment of the Continental Free Trade Area. We had not added the word African by then. And in 2015, the leaders of the time launched negotiations for the Continental Free Trade Area. And the negotiations were concluded in December 2017. And we decided that there should be an extraordinary summit on 21st March this year, which was done, to sign the agreement, and a record 44 countries signed, And as we are talking now, 49 have signed, 6 are about to sign. They are almost signing. Then we have received 6 instruments of ratification. The issue of boosting intra-African trade has various elements. We call them clusters. One of them is market information.
Sure.
So we teamed up with the African Export-Import Bank to popularize the intra-African trade fair as part of realizing a vision of market information. And it's not just on market information. We are going to work with them on questions of trade finance,
sure,
questions of payments, and questions of industrialization. So we are here to promote the advancement of Africa economically, socially, and politically. Thank you.
Sir, you just don't know it, but you are very well. Thank you, sir. Mr. Bello, can I come to you? From a Nigerian perspective, let's try to fit you into this trade fair. When you hear the outline of the political goals meshing into the economic goals, and then you hear the instruments that are now being used to be able to achieve those goals, what's your sense in terms of the difference that you think platforms such as these will make? And let's be frank, because if we are not frank and we praise and then we actually can't carry through the things that we're talking about, we're not helping ourselves. We will not see the progress. So your frank opinion, sir.
Okay. I think Ms. Awani's presentation underscores the need for Nigeria to look inwards and spread its trade through Africa. Okay. The intra-Africa trade fair cannot come at a better time, especially for Nigeria. Now, the statistic I'm referring to is that with the when you take out oil, intra-Africa trade from Nigeria is only 1.9% of total trade. Now, that can be arguable because we have data on informal trade in Nigeria, which is somewhere between $12 billion and $18 billion per annum, okay? But it is not captured. So most likely more captured as domestic trade. Now, where do these goods go to? They go into Africa, but the sellers don't know who the buyers are because it's informal. Now, how does intra-Africa trade fair support this trade? It will support it in capturing the trade that is really happening and for the economy of Nigeria to benefit from it. Now, what is Neximbank doing? We've recognized for a long time now that Nigeria needs to be present in intra-African trade, formal intra-African trade. We've now, over the past 3 or 4 years, started trying to remedy the challenges that are present. We've spoken of infrastructural challenges, access to credit, but I think one of the most important challenges that need to be addressed is market information. Right. Okay? We have a closed thinking that when you're talking trade and export, you're talking trade and export across the seas. Everywhere in the world, in Asia, intra-Asian trade accounts for about 43 to 45% of total trade. In Europe, it's 65%. Even in South America, doing better than Nigeria, about 19%. We are doing better than Africa, sorry, about 19%. In Africa, we're still hovering at about 15%. Now, with market information, with breakdown of barriers that are both tariff related and non-tariff related, we see that trade doubling. Before 2022, that has been set by Afreximbank. We believe and we are supporting. Some of the things we have done is to try and bridge the infrastructural gap, okay, by introducing initiatives such as the Sea Link. Interestingly, our neighbors are all coastal countries. In ECOWAS, for instance, out of the 15 countries, I think 12 or 13 are coastal countries, yet there is no ship shipping link between those countries. Neximbank is leading an initiative to put that in place. We're also talking of road transportation in between the African countries, and also championing the advocacy for Nigerian government to open up financing through open accounts within African countries.
Listening to you, I almost wonder if you were a private company, how analysts would rate you, because they would be looking at the huge opportunity in front of you, all the things that you are listing, and think, my goodness, where can this company go? It absolutely will be able to milk it. But I'll leave you for now, because I saved my two business colleagues for last, because I wanted them first to listen, and then I wanted them to come in and tell me if what they are hearing makes them think, yes, this is now beginning to happen. We are going to have the opportunity that we're looking for. Let me begin with you, engineer, and then I'll come out to our banker, because without him, nothing happens. Engineer, from your perspective, as president, vice president of the Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce and Industry, as well as agriculture, where do you see yourselves fitting into this whole issue of ensuring that we are able to get more of Nigerian products into the African continent and more of African products into the African continent? I spoke about oil. If Aliko Dangote is his way and is able to bring that refinery to life, can you imagine Nigerian oil, refined oil, going into Ivory Coast, into South Africa, into Angola? What difference would that make? Your view, sir.
First of all, let me first use this opportunity to congratulate Afreximbank, because for me, for the first time, I'm seeing that they are beginning to think for Africans. Why am I saying so? Because most of the time when you look at the African continent and the role of financial intermediation agencies, they're talking about big business. And big business, has never lifted people out of poverty. Now, thank you very much. Now, the area of concern to us in NACCIMA, which is the voice of business, is to see how we can develop and get the micro, small, and medium enterprises engaged, in trade, within Africa, in Nigeria and within Africa, and also with the rest of the world. Now, the instrumentality of the trade fair, as you know, NACCIMA has a mandate, to coordinate and organize trade fairs, in Nigeria, both local trade fairs and international trade fairs. And I think they cannot have a better partner than somebody who has been doing it for the last 50 years. This is the first trade fair they're organizing. And we feel that if they get experienced practitioners who have handled trade fairs before, they will begin to see, we can tell them, the issues that are important. Because you cannot underestimate what you can find at the trade fair complex. Yeah. The small, medium business person that brings something to the trade fair, and it is from there, that you can begin to expand and grow this type of business. So the issue of market access, I think everybody has spoken about it here. And I think that trade fair platform is very, very important, to bring, this thing to the knowledge of the whole world. And more importantly, and why I mentioned medium and small enterprises, is the role of the youths of our country. Because NACCIMA, we have come up with youth entrepreneurs. And we have seen that developing the youth entrepreneurs in NACCIMA, that is the future of Nigeria. Because they are the people that can make the difference. They have the energy, they have the vitality, and they also have the intellect, and they're very innovative. So I'm quite happy and privileged, to be on this panel, seeing that something is beginning to happen in Africa, to have the intra-African trade fair starting in Egypt.
It sounds like we're going to be seeing you in Cairo, sir.
Certainly we'll be in Cairo.
Commitment. Victor, listening to all of this, your assessment.
My assessment?
Of the difference that IATF will make.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very auspicious event and ties very well with what UBA believes in, UBA itself. UBA today is in 21 countries, the last being Mali. Our motivation for going into all of these countries is because we believe that Africans are the ones who are going to actually develop Africa. And UBA stands ready to be to be pivotal in that particular process. In the 21 countries where we operate today, we have almost 1,000 touch points, branches and everything, because we play what we call an embedded strategy. We don't go there and then cite 1 or 2 branches. And the only way you can reach out to everyone is to actually find out in all the countries where you operate. And who are you finding out to reach out to? It is the SMEs, it is the retail segment, it is the diaspora. And that's what is motivating us in what we do. Today, about 40% of our total balance sheet size comes from Africa, other than Nigeria. Okay? And it's growing. In fact, the risk we run is that Nigeria may be smaller than even the other parts of Africa. And like Abba said, we have found that the informal sector is quite significant. And these are not, unfortunately, well captured in some of the analysis that we all push. And part of the reason why the informal sector is the way it is, and it's quite big, is because the business people are very rational people. There's a huge amount of cost and tariffs and barriers that make formal trade very challenging, bureaucracies and all of that. As you bring those things down, those informal trade will find their way back to the formal sectors, and it will also help to increase government revenues. So for UBA, I think we are quite happy with what Afrexim is doing and with what AU and every other party here is doing, to actually also help to push or bring to bear or bring to life some of the things that have been driving what UBA has been doing over time. Now, what has UBA been doing for African entrepreneurs, especially at the lower scale? We support cocoa campaigns, we support cotton campaigns, and these are all taking place in different countries in the geographies where we operate. We lend against, we know that collateral is a major challenge. I'm sure my friend will be happy to hear this. It's a major challenge for the SMEs. And so part of what we're doing is we actually have a robust credit scoring system in some of the countries where we operate that allows us to lend with minimal collateral, but with quite a lot in the area of self-financing activities. Because there are some products that actually can self-finance themselves. If I am selling to a counterparty in another country against an inward LC coming from that country, I don't need a collateral for it, because the inward LC is already, dealing with that. If an entrepreneur here is selling to another customer in another country where that customer is quite sizable and his payment undertaking is adequate for me, then I can support that particular customer here to export his goods. So these are some of the things that we're doing as UBA. And we believe a platform that now brings everyone to a fair would be more than very helpful.
Sounds like we've got another commitment for Cairo here.
Yes.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Here we go. Mr. Oramah, I want us to go through a number of things, and I want us to go through them quickly because, as always, we don't have time. Let's talk about the instruments of making this happen. Last count, Africa had how many currencies? 41? I'm sure the bankers would know.
40.
Currencies, right? And out of those 40, whatever number of currencies, how many are tradable? How many are convertible? Probably 2 or 3. Yeah? Okay. So how do we solve that problem from a bank perspective?
Thank you very much. The issue of multiple currencies is one of the constraints to intra-regional trade. Because if you want to trade between two countries, the person who is buying has to go and change into dollars and send dollars to the seller country. Then the dollars are converted again to the currency of the exporter. So it's cumbersome, it wastes time, it costs money, it makes our exports competitive. So and also increases the risk of financing. So the banks have to look at all those currency issues, multiple currency issues, where they are financing. So what we are doing is to say, before we get to the single currency, which everybody is hoping for, we have to find a way that can make African currency nationally compatible within the geography of Africa, so to say. And the way we are doing it is to set up a Pan-African payment and settlement platform. And the Pan-African payment and settlement platform is intended to reduce the foreign currency content of conducting intra-African trade. It's intended to make intra-African trade payments possible in local currencies of all African countries. And so if a Nigerian, for example, wants to buy something from Ghana, the Nigerian will pay for it in Nigerian Naira, and the Ghanaian supplier will get paid in Ghanaian cedi. We will clear as Afreximbank. We will do the clearing. It's only the those who are in debit, so to say, at the clearing period, that will need to pay dollars. But when you do this, you clear multiple buyers within a country and then within the continent as a whole. Yeah. And you do it for, say, 55 countries. You will then find that the likelihood of actually paying dollars will be trending towards zero. So we are doing this because we believe that once we start doing it, we'll create a notional single currency. I call it notional single currency because that currency that is created virtually, sure. We have countries buy and hold what they think is dollars, yeah. But it is a balance in, say, another currency of another country. It becomes a notional currency controlled by the clearing arrangement of the African Export-Import Bank. Yeah. And over time, people will now be comfortable, and then the convergence issues you need to create a single currency will be easier to handle, and maybe sometime in the future, yeah. We can have a single currency.
Is it already operational?
Is it?
Is it already operational?
It's about to be operational. It's under development. We've done all the consultations. The pilot project is with the West African Monetary Zone, right. The 6 countries. The technology will tell me it will start first quarter next year.
Okay. All right. I want everybody's view on this, but before we do, I wanted to go to Ambassador Muchanga, because to be able to do that, I've got to be able to get to the place where I want to do business, right? 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 Business, right? Right? Right. Okay, let's talk about that difficult subject. So, visas on arrival. I came here on Saturday, and I used the visa on arrival route. And happily, I spent about an hour. Last time I spent about 2 hours, so now it was half the time now. So it is working. Can it get better? Yes, it can get better. Ambassador Muchanga, how do we get the governments to understand that for Africans to be able to trade to each other, they have to be able to visit each other? If you make it difficult, it's hard. Are you getting buy-in on that front?
Thank you very much. We are addressing that issue, but again, let me just compliment what Dr. Oramah said about reaching out to the rest of Africa, because politically it's very important. I wrote letters to each and every trade minister, inviting them to the trade fair, and also asking them to ensure that they reach out to the business people to go to the trade fair as exhibitors, buyers, and sellers. And I also requested them to reach out to their heads of state and government to ensure that their heads of state and government go to the trade fair, especially on country days. And we also organized a ministerial meeting of ministers responsible for trade to look at the issue of the African Continental Free Trade Area to take place in Egypt and end on 10th December. And the trade fair starts on 11th to enable all the African ministers responsible for trade to be participants in the trade fair. The issues of travel, thank you very much. The issues of travel are very important to the African Union. In January this year, the heads of state and government opened for signature the protocol on free movement of people, right of establishment, and right of residence. That protocol has received close to 30 signatures right now, and one ratification. It requires 15 ratifications before it enters into force. So on the basis of that, we shall be working towards a program of visa-free movement of Africans across Africa, as well as development of the African passport. But as we are moving towards that direction, some African countries have already taken initiatives, and the leading countries are Nigeria, where they issue visas on arrival, Rwanda, they issue visas on arrival, Kenya, they issue visas on arrival, and other countries will be working in that direction. Number two, we are also launching the single African air transport market, so that we invite the private sector now to take charge, to take advantage of this market, so that they come up with the budget airlines to fly across Africa. So we are facilitating that. It's up to the private sector, and I even have told them that I've got a name for you. Come up with an airline called Air Africa, so that it can go throughout Africa. So that's how we are moving in that direction. So then we've got a very massive program on infrastructure development across Africa. We call it the Program for Infrastructure Development Africa. Across Africa. Because without infrastructure, it's very difficult to do business. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So real progress on the political front. You know, please come in, Mr. President.
About movement, supporting what the African Union is doing, we are actively financing the air transport, making sure that the only way that we are able to deal with the infrastructure constraints today, that is carrying goods and people by air, that we have the capacity to do that. And in the past few years, we've already provided about $3 billion to African airlines. We actually arranged financing that refleeted Kenya Airways $1.9 billion. We financed Ethiopian Airline, the Angolan Airline TAG, Fly 540, and also Air Côte d'Ivoire advised the Air Senegal that just started, and so on. So across Africa, we are supporting the airline industry. In addition, we are working in partnership with others to look at setting up a Pan-African leasing platform for aircraft, because we know that it's capital intensive for airlines to buy aircraft. So we want to buy those aircraft and then provide leasing facilities. We think that is the way we can accelerate the acquisition of new capacities, not used aircraft. Right. New capacities across Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, I want your thoughts on what we've been discussing, the 2 points that have been raised by the gentleman. Can I begin with you, Mr. Bello? We come to the other two gentlemen.
Yeah, I think there is no better time for the intra-Africa trade fair. Now, what role are we playing? As a partner to Afreximbank, we are supporting. You didn't ask me if I was confirming attendance, but I am. But I'm not coming alone. We're going to encourage all our beneficiaries to be there. And for us, it is even is going to help us. You know, for us now, and I'll give you an example with the leather industry in Nigeria. What happens is leather is finished out of Nigeria and exported to Italy or Spain. However, there is a shoe manufacturing industry in Nigeria, and that's why I am emphasizing market information. So we import leather to finish shoes, but also export leather to other parts of the world. Now, there is also no reason for intra-African trade We know that shoe manufacturing has become a major contributor to the Ethiopian economy today.
Yeah.
Why Nigerian leather should not be exported into Ethiopia and start creating a regional value chain. Yeah. So for us, this intra-Africa trade is an opportunity for even our beneficiaries, most of which are SMEs, to now reach out into potential markets in Africa.
Sure. Did you hear me talk about import substitution? What do you think?
Yes, I did.
Would you support it?
Import substitution?
Yes.
That's what I'm speaking about, that there is no need to import finished leather into Nigeria or into Africa indeed, when there's a value chain for leather in Africa.
I know we're talking about doing away with tariff and non-tariff barriers, and here I am thinking, okay, maybe we need to do like some kind of program that prevents shoes from New Zealand reaching us here in Africa. But I think that would be justified. But it brings into play another conversation that we have had. And again, I want to those gentlemen, if I have omitted anything that you want to contribute to, please feel free to do so. The issue of African champions, creating these African companies that we are able to showcase to the world that take African goods into the African continent. Is there a way in which we can manage this without falling foul of the rules of the World Trade Organization? And obviously, this is the era of Donald Trump. You know, you could well come up and say, you know what, you're closing up your borders to our things. We're going to shut Apple from your shores as well. And we would have a riot here. You want to come in?
Yeah, let me speak to the earlier point. With regard to the single currency or the multiplicity of currency. I really appreciate what Dr. Oramah said about the fact that in Q1 next year, we will begin to have some semblance of a currency. We in UBA actually saw this as a major impediment to business, because as we help our customers across the geographies where we operate, we saw significant challenges in the way and manner they move currency. So we introduced two products. One is, we call it the Africash, and another one we'll call it Afritrade. We cannot do the exact thing that you want to do in a very big way, but we're able to do it in a much smaller way. So someone coming from Burkina Faso wants to come and do business in Lagos. Yeah. He doesn't need to carry CFA francs to Lagos. He simply deposits his CFA francs in our branch, in our offices, any of our branches in Burkina Faso. He comes to Lagos and is able to buy his products in Naira. Now, we internally then find ways, because, I mean, it's almost sometimes similar to this zero-sum game. It might add up, and then we're able to find ways of making sure we clear that particular currency. What we found quite interesting in this process is that we operate in Central African, regional bloc, and then the UEMOA, that's the West African or Francophone regional bloc. The two currencies actually, so you have the ZAF on one hand, not converting to ZOF on the other hand. And so, given that we play very actively in both areas, we have been able to actually bring some convergence as UBA to that entire process. So we're quite happy that, Afrexim is now taking it to a bigger state, a level where at least we're able to ensure that the 40-something currencies in Africa become somewhat tradable. It's going to increasingly, promote trade. We're also very happy about the point around transportation and the fact that we're starting from the air. In fact, that's where private sector can really play. If we start talking about road network, I'm sure we'll be on it forever. But from the air, we can do a lot. And I heard my colleague here talk about budget airlines. We know how budget airline makes business a lot easier in Europe and in other parts of the world. So one is very enthused by that particular point. So in my view, I think everything that we're talking about here and that we're doing today are all, is all moving in the right direction. Sure. Towards helping Africa move towards bringing or bridging or increasing intra-African trade.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got many other questions, but I can't ask them all today, so I want you to come in. Before I complain, because I wanted to say to you, and the point was raised earlier in some of the statistics that we had, the capacity right now for intra-African trade is more than $1 trillion, and yet we are using about $200 billion. What are we doing about the other 4/5 that we are not using? Why are we not using it?
Yeah, thank you very much. First, we're trying to focus now on how Nigeria, can contribute, to intra-African trade. First, I must congratulate us here in Nigeria for improving on the ease of doing business. And I'm happy you said that it took you 2 hours before. Now, in an hour, you can get your visa on arrival. So that is a good point.
It is good.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah,
I was just going to say, sorry to burst your bubble. I was just going to say, in Rwanda, it takes me 30 minutes.
Yeah, well, it's progress. We are making progress. I'm sure the target you are now setting for us in Nigeria is that how can we do it in 30 minutes? And I'm sure the government people are here, and I'm sure they will see how that can be done. But that is very significant progress. But following on that, in terms of transportation, well, my colleague has talked about an air bridge, improving and enhancing air transportation in Africa. And I also had the MD of Afreximbank with all the big money they're supporting African airlines, 3 billion to one country or 2.5 billion. But what I want him to do, what I would like to suggest is for Afrexim to come up with products where $3,000, can get to a small, medium enterprise in Nigeria. That $3,000 can create an intra-African champion easily. And they're all here. We have brilliant, if you see what is happening in the creative industry, the entertainment industry, in the media, it's fantastic. It's amazing. I'll give you an example. I went for a business visit to South Sudan, and the officer, the director, the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Petroleum, he told me that he couldn't see me for more than 10 minutes because he's been called by the president. But when I got to his office, he spent 45 minutes talking about Nigerian home movie, asking me about Aki Popo and the rest of them. It's amazing. 45 minutes he spent. So there are low-hanging fruits that the bank should develop products, that can get to them, and our youths can excel. So without sounding like a politician or something, these are the people that can drive growth in Africa.
Sure.
They are the people that can drive growth in Africa, and we should encourage them. So the other issue of currency is key.
Yeah.
Currency is key, and I hope the bank, can be strong and steadfast, because I'm sure they are going to meet with a lot of hurdles, but that is key for inter-African trade.
Okay, let him respond quickly before we open up the debate to the floor. There are many questions I'm sure that people would like to ask. Please come in, Ms. Oramah.
Well, thank you very much. I can assure you we are not in any way neglecting the small and micro enterprises. In fact, we're investing so much to make sure they have access to finance, trade finance. We invested so much thinking to find the best way to make them effective, to support the export promotion we're talking about, to also support the development of our continent effectively. Just a few days ago, there was a public hearing about a factoring law. Factoring is one of or recognized globally as the instrument that increases access to finance for SMEs, especially those operating in supply chains.
Yeah.
Factoring makes it possible for them to get access to finance without having to put up collateral. But factoring is not growing. That's why there's no factoring in Nigeria, as a fact.
Sure.
The whole of Africa, apart from South Africa, Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, we had nothing. But for nothing, we had increased the number of factoring companies in Africa to 32. But that is still very, very small. The biggest problem is that there is no factoring law. We don't have a factoring law in Nigeria.
Yeah.
So what did we do? We invested to create a model factoring law.
Sure.
We got lawyers from America, from Europe, where factoring had been for years, to help draft a model law. And then we had gone through sensitization, lawmakers, central bankers, including in Nigeria, to adopt it. So we are happy that the one in Nigeria will soon be adopted. The OHADA is adopting it, because we wanted a common law, really, so that you can also support value chains across Africa. So it's not that the factoring law in Nigeria is different from the one in Togo, is different from the one in wherever. So when a bank wants to support cross-border value chain receivable finance, it's dealing with several laws. Sure. So we have made that law one law. That's what we are promoting across Africa. Also, I would like to talk about the export trading companies. We know that the most effective way to integrate small and medium enterprises in export supply chains is to get them connected through larger export trading companies. So through those larger export trading companies, financing can be made available to the SMEs. The export trading companies are able to compete with larger capacity abroad because exporting needs those capacities. And those will be the source of information. They will have free flow of information to tell the SMEs the kinds of goods the markets need to enable them produce those goods and also enable them to improve their quality. So we are doing a lot supporting SMEs.
Absolutely. Until yesterday, I didn't know that Mitsubishi actually started as a trading company and was supported by organizations like JETRO. So we do need some work to do for you, and I think Ambassador Muchanga as well certainly helped the continent develop that factoring law so we are able to get more. Let's open up the debate to the floor. There should be a microphone moving around, so if you can identify, if you've got a question, a burning question. I have 20 that I have. Yes?
Good afternoon. Two very quick questions.
Very quick.
Does the Africa Eximbank want to use Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, to assist in the single currency as we try and figure out the AU currency for Africa? The first. Second one, I'm very happy we're talking about SMEs. Obviously, that is my forte. Is there a way of which the Africa Eximbank could support the banks, and I'm happy UBA is here, to enable them to give loans to SMEs like myself with lower interest? Because I'm coming from Ghana, and we have to pay 35% on loans for our companies. It's too expensive. So what kind of mitigation could they use to support the SMEs, even grow and scale up before we can come and approach you to export?
Thank you. Thank you. Ambassador Muchanga, do you want to come in or do you want to begin, Mr. Oramah? Please come in. There's the Bitcoin issue and there's,
Thank you very much. Digital currencies, we are not offering digital currencies. What we are providing is an agnostic, multilateral, deferred net settlement platform. So we are able to do that because we are able to operate across countries using our privileges and immunities to do those things some other commercial banks may not be able to do because of regulation. So we are providing an agnostic platform so that every bank, every telco, every payment provider can participate in it. With large numbers, we achieve our objectives of dealing with multiple currencies so that people can pay for goods in their currencies, and those who ship receive their own currencies. And you're talking about support for SMEs through banks. That's what we do every day. We have lines of credit, and that is always a very, very large proportion of our portfolio. Maybe sometimes about 30% of our portfolio, running to billions of dollars. We give lines of credit to banks. As a matter of fact, our target under the strategic plan we've embarked on is that by 2021, we will have given lines of credit to 500 African banks, and we will have provided them up to $8 billion in lines of credit, primarily to support the value chains and the intra-regional trade. It's up to them, the banks, now to on-lend according to the terms of the lines of credit. Are we offering subsidies? We lend to the banks. We allow the banks to price the loans according to market. And I am not a very big fan of subsidies because subsidies are not sustainable. if a business cannot survive on its own, don't rely on what a decision somebody makes. Because if you go and make an investment because somebody is subsidizing you, another person will come and decide they will not subsidize you, your business will fail. So if a business cannot survive on its own, then it means it's not optimal. Sure. But what we need to do is to make sure that the government does those things that increases costs. The infrastructure, you don't have to buy your own generator, you don't have to buy your own water, and all those things. If government deals with all of those, then there will be no need for subsidy, I think. The business that is sustainable is the one that can compete in the market. Thank you very much.
Indeed, thank you, sir. And that's a wrap of the third leg of our conversation on the road to transforming Africa, where we have taken you from Cairo in Egypt to Johannesburg in the southern tip of the continent, and now here we are in Abuja, Nigeria. Next up on that calendar is Nairobi, Kenya, where we will be exploring ways in which the African continent can certainly do more business with each other. From all of us here, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.